Nesting a for loop within another for loop is a powerful way to process data. In fact, that's something that's done a lot. It sounds like something special, but it's just really one block of code inside another block. So let's see an example of that using for loops to generate times tables. Now these we use to teach children multiplication and normally went up to 12. So I'm going to call my new Python file timestables.py. Right, so in terms of the code, I'm going to start by typing for I in range, parentheses 1, 13, closing parentheses and a colon. Then on the next line, for j in range, parentheses 1, 13, right parentheses, colon. Then we're going to print on the line after that, print parentheses, double quotes, left to right curly brace with a 0 in the middle, times, and left to right curly brace with a 1 in the middle, is, and left to right curly braces with 2 in the middle. Then closing double quotes, dot format. Then we're going to type j, comma, I times j. And we've got 2 closing right parentheses. And what I'm going to do on the next line then is print, and we'll just print a series of dashes to separate the output. Okay. So what have we done here? Well, firstly, we've got an outer loop on line 1 that goes around 12 times. Inside that on line 2, we've got another loop that also goes around 12 times, and it'll do that each time the outer loop loops. When I has the value 1, j will loop through the values from 1 to 12. I will then become a 2, and j goes through 1 to 12 again, and so on. So I'm going to run the program first, and then we'll step it through the debugger. So when we run it first, you can see we've got the output there. We're printing the value of j first, as you can see, and you can see that looping from 1 to 12. The second value on each line after times is the value of I. So in the first table, I is 1. When we go around the outer loop again, I is 2. Just go down to the next set of tables there. And that's giving us a second table and so on. Now the debugger can help with making sense of this. So what I'm going to do is set a breakpoint on line 3, the line that does the printing, and then let's run the program in the debugger. Firstly, we can see the values of I and j in the variables pane. Not all IDEs do this, but IntelliJ also shows the values in the code pane. You can see it at the top of the screen at the end of lines 1 and 2. That's helpful because you can focus on the code and still see the values changing. But it also means that I can switch to the console tab so we can see the output being printed and still see the values of our variables. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Right, so firstly, let's try this. I'm going to step over the first line. And we get back to line 2. This is the inner for loop. Step over again, which I'll do. You can see j now has the value of 2. When I step over that line again, we get back to line 2, ready for j to get its next value. So I'm going to continue stepping through the code until j is 12. And there's j12, as you can see there. That's the end of the inner loop. So if I step over again now, you see we get to go one more time. And then it's hit line 4. We're still inside the outer loop, but the inner loop has now completed. If I step over once more now, we're ready to go around the outer loop again. And I'm going to step over twice more to see I gets its next value 2 and j is starting counting from 1 again. Alright, so there's nothing really else to say about this. If you want to continue stepping through the code until you're comfortable with what's happening, then pause the video now and come back to it once you've stepped all the way through it. What I'm going to do now is clear the breakpoint and use the resume program button over here to let the program finish at normal speed. And you can see the program's now finished. Alright, so let's finish this program now with a mini challenge. Here's your mini challenge. What happens if we, 1, indent the print another 4 spaces? In other words, we move it over to the right. What would happen? And 2, what would happen if we move the indent completely for that line? So work out what you'd expect to happen before you try it. Pause the video if you're doing that. When you're ready, come back and we'll go through that challenge then. Alright, so welcome back. How did you get on? Did you work out what the effects of those changes would be before running the code? Well, firstly, looking at line 4, it's currently part of the block that's controlled by the outer for loop. So that means that all 12 lines for j get printed out before we get the row of dashes in the output. So if we indent line 4, it'll become part of the inner loop and should print out every time around the loop. So let's go up here and do that now. I'm just going to tab over, like so. If I run the program now, you can see we get a row of dashes after every line showing the multiplications. And obviously it's made the output significantly longer as well. Right, so we'll close down the run window. The second part was determining what would happen if we remove the indentation completely. Alright, so removing the indentation completely will take line 4 out of both loops. So that means it should only print once right at the end of the program. So let me do that. So I moved it way over to the left, so in other words removed all the indentation for that line. If I run the program again now, you can see what's happened there. We've only got one row of dashes right at the end of all the output. So there's another couple of things we need to know about for loops, but we'll look at them in the next few videos. We've seen the basics of how a for loop works to iterate over some sequence. The sequence can be a string or a range, but Python also has other sequences that we can iterate over. I'll actually be talking about lists in the next section, but I'll introduce them in the next video. They'll give you more practice at working with for loops, as well as a way to cover 2 more things we need to know about them. So, see you in the next video.